Very inspiring to hear about people's journeys, about how they came to this field, see many images, and see how they became who they became. And I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Dr. Mayfin Wei, so another check, and then for nominating me, and also Dr. Elisa Flores and Dr. Ken Rice for writing letters to support my nomination. And as I share about my talk, I reflected on what to share. And I decided to do something that's unconventional for this and also for me. So just want to put that out there. I'm quite nervous. This is the first time ever I've written out a script for me to kind of read off from. 15 years ago, my hair was all black at that time. And I was a first year University of Missouri assistant professor. I feel like I was on the top of the world. And Dr. Punky Hebner, Mary Hebner, they encouraged me to check out the fellows talk. And it was very inspiring. And I envisioned that one day I would be on this stage. And of course, some people have a dream, and then they kind of somehow feel like I have to make a vow to do something if that somehow comes true. So I thought, what would I say on the stage if there's one day for me to be on this stage? I thought, okay, so maybe that'll be the day that I disclosed a side of me that I've hidden for many, many years. So some of you are expecting me to disclose a deep, dark secret. I hate to disappoint if you're thinking this or that, but I actually came out as a devout Christian 5 years later, after I joined Fuller Seminary, the clinical psychology program there. For much of my career, I've compartmentalized my Christian faith. Growing up in Taiwan, where Christians make up less than 5% of the population, I was excited to no longer be a minority when I came to the US. But shortly after I started my counseling side program, I realized I was a minority in the field. There was an impression of Christians as the oppressor, especially toward LGBTQ, the community. And I thought it made sense from what my professors, my peers shared. But also I struggled. How do I keep my faith as I navigate my journey in becoming a psychologist? And to be honest, it wasn't easy. When I was studying at Penn State, there were many times I thought, maybe this wouldn't coexist. I might not become a psychologist. I felt pretty fragmented. There's different parts of me. I'm compartmentalized that. I acted like a psychologist, tried to think or talk like a psychologist when I was with psychologists, and did otherwise when I was in other settings. And Hong Bing had that quote about when you're always on the side of the majority or trying to be the majority, you should reflect. So I think that was very encouraging, empowering, that I'm not doing that now. Even though I was able to compartmentalize my faith in my profession, but often I felt fragmented and discontent by not being able to be congruent across work, family, and church. In my 5th year at Mizzou, I received an offer to join Fuller Theological Seminary, focusing on the Chinese population. It appealed to me because it integrated 3 different aspects of me: my Taiwanese self, because it was working with the Chinese population, and my Christian self, and also my psychology part. But I also was worried that would this be like committing an academic suicide in terms of indirectly coming out to my colleagues that I've been trying to hide a side of me. Transitioning to Fuller was not just always easy. It was hard, to be honest, at the beginning. I felt like an imposter. I did not have much theological training. But on the other hand, spiritually, I did sense a sense of relief, sort of like the prodigal son coming home. After hiding my faith for a couple decades, a seminary accepted me to be a faculty in their psychology program. I found a place where I could express my faith openly, talk about my faith in class, connect with colleagues from various denominations, which showed me that Christians are not all the same. The diversity of my colleagues allowed me to safely explore and eventually deconstruct some of my original beliefs. So there's a part of me that was starting to integrate at Fuller. But despite finding Fuller to be a more friendly environment for me, attending APA was very different with a Fuller badge. When I came to APA with the Mizzou badge, I felt like there was a sense of prestige. People would come up to me like, oh, you're at Mizzou, what is it like, and all that. How do you apply, how do you get to Mizzou, and so and stuff. When I came to APA with the Fuller badge, it felt quite lonely. I think besides the people who knew me, those who didn't look at my badge and like, oh, how's Pasadena, California? So there was avoidance on the tense conversation about working at a seminary or the topic of Christianity. I started to keep a lower profile and disengage from my previous involvement with APA. Secretly, I thought maybe I dream of one day becoming an APA fellow kind of diminished or vanished altogether. In 2020, my world was turned upside down. I could no longer sidestep the compartmentalization and the tension between my faith and psychology. God placed a stranger in my home during the pandemic after my 20-year-old daughter, Juliet, came out to us as non-binary and later a transgender woman. At first, it was very hard, emotionally and cognitively, that someone that I had known for 20 years is actually not the person that I knew. The son that I had imagined wasn't actually that. I felt very disoriented, puzzled, worried, tensed, lost, and the seemingly messy reality no longer fit nicely into my worldview. I could no longer compartmentalize. Now I was a parent of a trans child. I started to document my journey as a transparent, I call it transparenting experience, and the different stages that I was going through. Initially, there was shock, wondering why. Is this real? How do I explain this? What would this look like for my child's future? How would we interact as a family? And then, of course, I went back to my old coping mechanism, compartmentalizing, not dealing with the elephant in the room. And I was very fortunate to talk to some colleagues in the counseling psych field, and they normalized the process of transitioning. That was very helpful. And then they also normalized the process of how hard it is to be a parent of a transgender child. And I was encouraged by another colleague, Dr. Alex Morales, to communicate with my daughter before we were avoiding the elephant in the room. And breaking the ice was very helpful. We communicated not only through family therapy, but we went on weekly walks, me and my daughter. And I remember there was one moment I was watching our family video from about 18 years ago, and I saw my son when he was 4, and I just sobbed nonstop for about 30 minutes because I felt like he was no longer there. It felt very similar, the feeling felt very similar to how I felt when my brother died. And emotionally, I think my son is gone. But also, on the other hand, I'm glad that he's not gone, but I have a daughter now. And I think that was a part of starting to accept, not only cognitively by changing the pronouns, but emotionally, that she's my daughter now. And beyond that, I realized there is a sense of cognitive acceptance, emotional acceptance, but it wasn't until one day when I watched my daughter perform at a play as a lead, female lead, at her college, that I was able to perceive her as a female. And I realized the perception part is even deeper and harder. But I was very grateful. And there's still ongoing things I'll need to learn, or occasionally mistakes that I make. But I'm very grateful for how Juliet has stretched me and how I've grown in this process. To be honest, when I was going through this process, theological stuff was not in my mind. It was later, after I found emotional and cognitive peace, that I started to explore the issue between theological perspective and how we look at same-sex marriages and queer relationships. So I'm very grateful for New City Church in Los Angeles. Through that, it provided me a space to address the theological part. And now I feel fully at peace, believing that God blesses queer relationships and accepts everyone in the LGBTQ community. I feel more like an integrative self. I feel like finally I found inner peace, and I'm glad I'm able to share that on this stage, because I think my colleagues here have a lot to do with it. And you're like the gold that has held me together in my compartmentalized parts. I know standing here as a new APA fellow, I'm not here because of my Christian faith or my journey of integrating it. It's more about perfectionism, about international students, cross-national adjustment. But I want to express how blessed I feel to be part of this academic community and the counseling field. It has not only prepared me for a fulfilling career, but also helped me become a more loving and integrated father and parent and person. I can't imagine how much more challenging my journey with Juliet would have been without the support of my counseling psychology home and my queer and ally friends and colleagues. I see you all and many others like the glue that I mentioned. And I'm also extremely grateful to share on this stage with people from my two compartmentalized worlds, my counseling psychology professional family, as well as my Christian colleagues and students from Fuller. Usually I compartmentalize these worlds, but today you're here together. In this increasingly polarized world, I actually struggle most with Christian nationalists and Trump supporters. And I hope sharing my story helps a little with breaking through this polarization by illustrating that none of us truly fit in a single, neatly defined box. We're all complex, multifaceted individuals. Instead of letting our outward differences divide us, I believe we should cultivate the courage to be curious about one another. So I invite all of us to look inward, explore our fundamental parts, and be open to the differences within our community. Let's find the strength and humility to be curious, ask questions, and seek understandings. When I was preparing this, I actually sent this to a mentor and asked her about it, and she said, "You're very courageous. Let's talk." And I still went through it, so I have to admit, it feels a bit risky to share on stage, not knowing how you might feel, especially being aware that my struggles are nothing close to comparing with the queer friends and colleagues of what they have gone through in their journey in their lives. And also that many of my Christian colleagues and students might not be wrestling with integration the same way that I had. In hearing my story, some of you may even feel uncomfortable, offended, or confused. Regardless, I welcome conversation and learning about your reactions and to start the process of dialoguing. Thank you for this opportunity.